You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and today we're headed over to Tampa, where a former police sergeant in charge of the sex crimes unit with the Tampa Police Department, well, he's been found guilty of 100 charges primarily focused on child pornography. And it was a simple chance encounter that got him caught and convicted. See, the now 63-year-old Paul Mumford had served, like I said, for about a year and a half as the sergeant in charge of the sex crimes unit before he retired in 2015. But like a lot of law enforcement, Paul has other side hustles. Even after retiring, he served as a reserve officer, and one of his side hustles was a security guard at the Amalie Arena. Well, it was in March of 2021 when James Bowie, that's another Tampa officer, well, he bumped into Paul, who was directing traffic at the Tampa Bay Lightning game. And this is a sweet reunion between the two. Paul had been James's sergeant when the two were assigned to the street crime squad, and James wasn't at the Tampa Police Department anymore either. He had moved on to the Tampa General Hospital, working in information security there. James stopped to catch up and really just say, "Hey buddy, what's up?" And during the conversation, Paul asked for a favor. See, he had a hard drive that was kind of acting up at home, and he asked if James could give it a once-over, try to recover some files from that hard drive that he would really like to keep a hold of. Well, being good buddies, James said, "Sure, let me look at it." A little while later, James drove to Paul's house, scooped up the broken computer, and took it back to his place where he could work on it when he had some free time. After tinkering with it several times, James had some magic and was able to recover some of the stored files. He clicked open one of the files and he found a boat registration that had Paul's name on it. Harmless. So he clicked on another file. Up popped a photo of a young girl engaging in sexual activity with a group of adult men. Startled, but also feeling investigative by nature, he closed that file and opened another. Same story, but a different girl. Angry and disappointed, he unplugged the device and he sat on it. He tried to sleep, tried to relax, and that just didn't work. He couldn't let it go. The next morning, he phoned an attorney and explained the whole situation. And I get it. I get where James is at. This is a compromising situation. What if he gets blamed for the photos? What if Paul turns it all around onto him? What if he calls law enforcement and they don't do the correct thing and they instead cover up for Paul? So James felt like the best option, the best way for him was to call an attorney and protect himself while doing the right thing. That attorney gathered all the information and scheduled a meeting with the Tampa Police Department. They turned over the hard drive as evidence, and James gave an on-the-record statement. And then he never spoke to Paul again after that. Well, a computer expert with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, so now we have the state guys involved. Well, that computer expert, he was able to create an exact copy of the hard drive. Through the minutia of mundane files, the expert recovered 100 sexualized images of children, some pornographic cartoons, and then some files that showed children involved in sex acts with adults and other minors. He also uncovered 61 Word documents that were filled with erotic and sexually explicit stories, all involving children. One of the documents was more than 500 pages long. These are like novels, you guys. And the literary tells featured descriptions of children engaging in sex acts, descriptions of acts that matched the photos that had been recovered. Unfortunately, it gets worse. The literary tells listed Paul as the author, and some of the stories matched Paul's life. They were written in the first person, where the story's narrator described himself as an older dude with gray hair who is a retired cop now working as a reserve officer, coincidentally at hockey games. And this retired cop has been married twice, and one of those wives had 3 sons. Well, all those details line up with Paul's life. Armed with that evidence, detectives confronted Paul in February of 2022. That was almost an entire year later. When they arrived at his home with the search warrant, Paul was with his grandkids. The detectives seized all the electronic equipment in the home, and Paul willingly chatted with those detectives for about an hour. When they asked about the hard drive that had been given to James, he claimed it had just stopped working after it had been hacked. When they explained that they had found 100 pornographic images, Paul said he knew nothing about them. Well, last week, Paul's trial for the 100 charges concluded. During the trial, prosecutors explained that the former sergeant over sex crimes knew how damaging the evidence on the hard drive could be. So, with that in mind, they say that Paul frequently transferred all the files to a thumb drive, then back onto the hard drive when he would access them. The prosecutor spent significant time explaining the parallels in the fiction stories to Paul's own life. Now, Paul's attorney did his job here, fighting repeatedly to have the stories barred from being entered as evidence in the trial. He tried to convince the judge that the works of fiction cannot be used to convict a man of a criminal charge. But the judge sided with the state and said the photos and the stories were intertwined. That seemed to leave Paul no choice. He had to take the stand if his works of fiction were going to be used against him. While testifying, he admitted to authoring some of the stories, but not all of them. He then went on to explain to the jury that the stories he wrote were sort of a therapy for the retired cop. He said he himself had endured extreme sexual abuse from offenders involved in a pedophile ring in the state of Florida. And he said this was while he was 10 years old to 16 years old. He said he believed writing about the horrific experiences would help him, quote, get over the continued effects of abuse. He owned up to the stories, but on the stand, he denied that he had anything to do with the images. He said he didn't know they were even on the computer. He also said the concept of him moving files on and off the computer via a thumb drive was just not true. He explained that in his home, various computers were located in different rooms, and he testified that the external hard drive was always connected to his laptop computer. He said that external hard drive stored all of his tax documents and his scanned receipts, and then some digital receipts, and obviously some family photos and police training materials, and then other harmless but needed documents. And he said some of those were so old that they could be tracked back to the 1980s. He also stated that the whole family knew the password to the laptop and that the password had stayed the same for years. He then went on to say that when a different family member would access the laptop for whatever reason, they would just sign in under his name. Paul was also asked about his time working as the guy in charge of the sex crimes unit. He said that didn't bother him, reading reports of child sex abuse. But it was the images of child pornography that kind of threw him over the edge. It was just too much, too close to what he had endured as a child. He said that explained his short time of working in that unit. He then said this phrase, "No, I have never possessed child pornography. Child pornography disgusts me." Well, it took a jury of 3 men and 3 women 3.5 hours to find Paul guilty of the 100 charges. The Tampa Bay Times reported that Paul wouldn't even look at the jury. He just kept his head lowered until he was cuffed and removed from the courtroom. Each charge carries a maximum of 15 years, and there are 100 charges. His sentence will be determined later this year. His attorney told the Tampa Bay Times that he is beginning the appeals process immediately. Paul had served as a police officer for 29 years. These sorts of cases are always just so, disappointing. There's these men and women that we trust with our safety. And when Paul or any other LEO behaves this way, it only tarnishes those men and women who are working so hard for their communities. Now, I promise you all the time that I'm watching for the final details in the stories that I bring you, and I have an update to one of those stories today. Remember the Minnesota mom who had her 2 children and her husband at a Roseville hotel for a little staycation? Well, that mother, 39-year-old Allison Chardon, was finally sentenced for her crimes. But let's remember what those crimes were. While at the hotel, her and her husband, they got into a bit of a tiff. And that tiff blossomed into a full-blown shouting match at the hotel pool. Witnessing the shouting match were 2 15-year-old hockey players who were also staying at the hotel with their entire hockey team from Colorado. After Allison's husband had yelled at her across the pool and stormed back up to their shared room with their 2 shared children, Allison got in the hot tub with the 2 teen boys and she kind of began chatting them up, explaining that her and her hubby were trying to save their marriage after she had cheated on him, and that this little staycation was kind of the last-ditch effort. Through the conversation, Allison friended one of the teen boys on Snapchat. The boys left the pool area, and a few minutes later, Allison began messaging one of the boys, asking if she could stay in their hotel room. She said her and her hubby's argument had gotten even worse, and she needed somewhere to be. After showing up at their door, the 2 boys let her in, and the conversation eventually turned sexual. The spicy conversation then turned into sexual contact and activities. Eventually, the boys began to kind of be uncomfortable with the situation, and Allison left the room. The following morning, the boys were at the arena preparing for their hockey game, and Allison showed up. After making the boys feel creeped out at the game, Allison then continues to text one of the boys after he returned to Colorado. More creeping out is going on, and the boys independently tell people in their lives what happened while they were on their Minnesota hockey trip. The reverberations were swift. The boys were suspended from their hockey team. Allison was arrested. The boys were reinstated to the team, but then they just scrapped the entire season. The team just canceled it. And according to prosecutors, the boys endured mean comments and were shunned by members of their community and their team. Allison was initially charged with 3rd and 4th degree criminal sexual conduct. Allison was eventually convicted of sexual abuse. On Monday, she was sentenced for her crimes. And are you ready? The 39-year-old that committed criminal sexual conduct with 2 15-year-olds will spend 2 weekends in jail. Not prison, just jail. And she will be required to complete 200 hours of community service. She will have to register as a sex offender for 10 years, and she is also expected to complete mental health treatment. Let me know what you think of this sentence. Is it enough? The maximum punishment for Allison could have been 8 months in prison. Let me know in the comments. And now to the power of the internet. Whether you like it or not, it's real. And one man's video of a vile altercation between an Eagles fan and a Packers fan has over 27 million views on the platform X. So what happened that has everyone so interested? Well, the ugly scene unfolded on Sunday night at Lincoln Financial Field in South Philly. Seated in the crowd was a man, Alexander Becerra, and his fiancée. And here's the deal. As I checked out Alexander's X account, this guy is a Green Bay Packers digital creator. So what I mean by that is his account is dedicated to the Packers. And when I started looking at his account, he has listed over 10,000 followers on X. I'm sure that is much more than he had before this viral moment, but his content truly is just about the Packers. I will tell you this, a previous post on X just days before the Sunday night game shows the crazy play the Packers QB Jordan Love ran just the week before. And that X post has about 453 likes. That's not bad. But he has other previous posts sharing his YouTube channel that only have a couple of likes. And his YouTube account does pretty good. His videos there discuss Packers like injury updates or their wins or their losses. And he kind of does deep dives into players. Bottom line, the guy is a super fan and he's monetized it. Good for him. So let's now head back to that Sunday night game just a few days ago. It's important to note that the Eagles fans are notoriously kind of jerks. It's all right. They own it. They own the good and the bad. And it's also important to note that the Eagles and the Packers, they don't like each other. And this game on Sunday was a high stakes game. So I'm just setting the table for you. We've got Alexander and his fiance, they're at the game, and they're in one row, and behind them and one seat down from the fiance is an angry Eagles fan. Now, we don't know what happened between the fiance and the angry Eagles fan before Alexander started rolling tape. There could have been words. There could have been way too much beer. Who knows? But Alexander decided to start filming the gross insults being hurled by the Eagles coat-wearing older gentleman. In the snippets of the confrontation that was posted by Alexander on X, you can hear the man calling the fiancé an ugly, dumb C word. Okay, side note, that's one of the grossest words out there. Alexander responds and tells the man to not call his fiancé names. The guy retorts back with, "She's an ugly, dumb C word. You gonna do anything? Shut the F up and watch the game." All right, here, I'm gonna let you listen to the video. It's not long, but it's a little muffled, so that's why I wanted to explain it before I played it for you.
After reviewing the play, the runner was short of the goal line. They got one more yard though. They're close. Yeah, but they're not in. It's not a touchdown. Yeah. So you don't up in the air. Okay, well, don't call her. Don't. She's an ugly dumb. Cool. After the third quarter. Yup.
Now, all throughout the berating, the fiancé, she just keeps her cool. She doesn't even seem like teary or frustrated. Partway through the video, she turns to the camera and she makes a boo-hoo crying face while pretending to rub her eyes with her balled up fists. I think she only turns around and looks at the angry fan maybe one time in the whole entire video. Here's what Alexander did though. He took that video, he posted it to X, and he marshaled the X army to figure out who the obnoxious fan was. And boy, did they deliver quickly. Those internet sleuths exposed the Eagles fan to be Ryan Caldwell, and they did it in a matter of hours. But there's a twist. This guy, Ryan Caldwell, he's a project manager at BCT Partners. All right, I know. I didn't know what the company was either, but this DEI company, okay, that stands for Diversion, Equity, and Inclusion, well, they focus on being a management consulting firm based in New Jersey, and they aim to, quote, harness the power of diversity, insights, and innovation to transform lives, accelerate equity, and create lasting change. All of that according to their website. And oh, the irony. Once Ryan was exposed, the company on Monday released a statement saying that an internal investigation into the situation had been started. However, they stopped short on Monday of naming the employee involved in the investigation. Here's what they actually wrote. Quote, "The management at BCT Partners has been made aware of a video circulating involving an employee making offensive remarks outside of the workplace. BCT Partners denounces this type of behavior, and we take this matter extremely seriously. As an organization that has always stood for inclusivity, the conduct displayed was completely unacceptable and stands in direct opposition to our company values. We have already begun a full investigation as an internal personnel matter to determine what actions will be taken. We sincerely apologize to everyone affected by this behavior, and we remain committed to fostering a culture of respect for all." Well, Ryan might regret the amount of beers he consumed or the anger management courses he didn't attend, if there were any of those, because Ryan has now been handed down 2 forms of punishment. First, late Tuesday, BCT Partners wrapped up their basically 24-hour investigation, and they, quote, "decided to part ways with Ryan." Their statement reads that the separation is effective immediately and that they condemn the former employee's conduct in the strongest possible terms. The statement also says that the conduct and language were vile, disgusting, unacceptable, and horrific. Alrighty then, they were so vague. Secondly, Ryan has also run afoul of the arena and has been banned from all future events at Lincoln Financial Field. No more home games watching his Eagles play. And you guys, that's too bad, because his Eagles, well, they won that Sunday night game 22-10 against the Packers. And they're pretty good. The Eagles will now face the Los Angeles Rams on Sunday at Lincoln Financial Field again. And the Eagles have already beaten the Rams this season. But Ryan won't be able to attend. And if you're a little concerned that Alexander didn't do more, didn't stick up for his fiancée, he answered that question. He said he knew that nothing was going to be gained by the altercation getting even more heated. Ryan had 2 friends with him, and Alexander said he was the only one with his fiancée. So he fought back with his X platform instead. And it kind of looks like he won. Alexander also took the loss in stride by posting on Monday the following. "Anywho, the Packers' 2024 season is now over. Off-season time." Well, the Facebook post by the New York Post has over 515 comments on this story. And the X post, the one put up by Alexander, well, it has 18,000 comments, which means you guys probably have something to say about this. Let me know in the comments. And now to what you had to say about Monday's episode. I think most of you were so surprised that someone who clearly had significant mental deficiencies when she committed the Slender Man stabbings is now being let out of her mental health facility. And I noticed something. You guys weren't questioning the doctors that made the decision, the fact that maybe she is healed. You're far more concerned for the victim, Peyton. And I love that about you guys. Mrs. Hughes on YouTube said that she worries about how Peyton will handle the feelings that will arise with this release. And Samantha, well, she's worried that someone can't be rehabilitated once they are at the point of stabbing someone on the premise of basically a pretend world. You're worried that Peyton is now going to face more violence potentially. And then, Misty, thank you for working the overtime and bringing us along. Work is always better when we get to listen to things we love. Well, that's your Thursday episode of Rise and Crime. Thanks for being here with me. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for being interactive. I love that part of this podcast. It makes it so much more fun. I'm just naturally a writer. I've done it my whole life. It's part of my regular gig, my regular occupation, and I love being able to do it here at Rise and Crime as well. I do say all the time when people talk to me that I have the best listeners out there. Please keep leaving the 5-star reviews if you haven't left one, and the positive comments, and like and follow us on all of our social media accounts at Oh No Media. That is Murder with My Husband, Into the Dark, and of course, Rise in Crime. Join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.